Hello, and welcome to the Fantasy Rewind podcast. I'm your co-host, Dylan Stoll, and I'm joined as always by my friend, Michael Whifford.
Hey!
So today, we are going to be talking about episode 4 of House of the Dragon, which is titled...
King of the Narrow Sea.
The King of the Narrow Sea. Of course, talking about our boy Daemon Targaryen there. We'll see if we still want to call him our boy or not by the end of this episode. So, before we get into what happened in this one, we're going to give out the typical reminders here. If you want to get in contact with the show, you can send us an email at fantasyrewindpod@gmail.com. You could get at us on Instagram, which is at fantasyrewindpod, and at Twitter, which is at fantasyrewind. All right, so you guys heard it last episode for the first time. Let's hop into the rewind.
Fantasy Rewind.
All right, Mike, so let's get right into this. Let's talk about King of the Narrow Sea. What were your overall thoughts on this episode?
So it was good in terms of like character development for Rhaenyra, and
Rhaenyra?
It was really Rhaenyra, yeah, sorry. And it was neat seeing Daemon again in the mix, but I don't know. There was a lot I didn't like about this episode, and it just seemed to be kind of almost like a filler episode, really. I mean, stuff happened, but nothing that's like, except for the end, overall super important. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I mean, I disagree with you a little bit in that I do think this is more of a filler episode, less sword clashing, more politicking. It's actually really important for a lot of different reasons, but...
Oh, I'm sure it builds this stuff, but...
It does, but it's also more than just what it's building towards. We'll get into it here.
Okay. You take us on the Westeros train.
This was not my favorite episode of the season so far. That still remains with episode 3, but I did still think this one was good. So yeah, let's just talk about this really quick. So the core crux of this episode is twofold.
Rhaenyra gets her rocks off.
Well, I was going to say, we have the return of Daemon Targaryen to court and all that entails, and then we also have the overarching theme of who is Rhaenyra going to be forced to marry. And so, as you're making crude hand gestures, it's not going to be Sir Criston Cole, I'll tell you that right now. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have other uses for her. So I would like to just, first of all, let's dive right in and talk about the opening scene here where we see the suitors lined up for Rhaenyra. Now, one of the reasons I want to bring this up is because, you know, this goes right with what the king was saying last episode of, okay, fine, you know what, Rhaenyra, I'm not going to worry about you getting a husband, you do it yourself. And so she's out there doing the whole tour, trying to see if anyone tickles her fancy, but she doesn't really like any of these people and quickly dismisses them. Some cool little
scene, though.
So yeah, some cool little tidbits, though, happen in this scene. So there is the young kid who gets into that sword fight with the older gentleman there and shows him that he's not so much a child after all and drives his sword right through his heart and then runs away, basically, kind of shocked by what he did. But the names of these two are what's important for Westeros lore. There is the Blackwoods and Bracken, which they are two houses that have long-standing feuds with each other, which shows why the kid was so quick to anger with this guy, and also why this guy decided to pick on this kid the way he did. And this feud has ramifications for down the line, for lots of cool stuff that might happen in Westeros later. But I just thought this was a little cool nod to fans that are more steeped in the lore of Westeros and its houses. But let's just get into the main bit here about Daemon, about Rhaenyra, about what Daemon tries to do with Rhaenyra, and all of that. So what were your impressions of when you saw Daemon just walking up to the throne, carrying this hammer in one hand, like wearing a crown, and then he just kneels? Like, were you surprised? Like, what was going on with you for that?
No, so after, seeing the dragon just fly overhead of Rhaenyra's boat, like, I knew it was Daemon immediately. Mm-hmm. And seeing him kind of walk, like, everyone kind of get all up in arms and, like, worried. Like, I knew he was coming into the court. I was surprised when it was just him, but I kind of got the notion that they were gonna kind of make up. I don't know. I just didn't I didn't think anything else was gonna happen at that moment, Otherwise, it would have been over very quick.
Definitely would have. But I thought it was really interesting how Damon comes in after all of this goes down in the Stepstones, and he seems like he's a changed man.
Oh, well, we know he's not.
Oh, yeah, no. Damon was playing possum, trying to get in and slide into what he wants here. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was really interesting how he was coming in humble, seeming like he was changed, like he didn't even care about his crown, that he was named King of the Narrow Sea, didn't mean anything to him, left it unguarded with just like bodies staked out there as warnings for people about what happens when you rebel against the crown or like work against the crown of Westeros. But then we shift dramatically here when Daemon invites Rhaenyra out to like sneak out at night.
So this was really interesting. I don't know if you got these vibes with this, but I kind of almost got like Aladdin type vibes.
So that does make sense. Like the street rat taking the princess out for a night on the town,
dressed up as as a boy, or in disguise at least. And I thought this was a really neat scene because you had talked last episode about how she had no connection to the people.
Yeah.
That became very clear here.
Yes. I was going to bring this up if you didn't. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So when Rhaenyra is out in the with the midnight crowd, if we will, or the 2 a.m. crowd, whatever the owl is, she sees a play. In that play, they're kind of pretty much talking crap about her being queen, and says that she would never be king or queen necessarily because she's not her brother, and she feels very upset about that, and she's yelling slander, boo, and Damon's kind of you can be quiet now because you don't understand. That's what these people think. And she's like, who cares what they think? It's inconsequential. And he's like,
you want to rule them?
Yeah. You want to rule these people and you got to know them, right? And
I thought this was great because of that. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's okay. Last bit here is, it just showed to me she's never had any connection or any communication with everyday people, and so therefore she's almost like a spoiled brat. And that theme sort of continues throughout for this episode for me.
It really does. You're 100% right. And so to me, what that particular scene at the play confirms was all my worst fears of her from last episode, where we didn't know what she did to earn the people's love. Why should the people want her as their queen? And apparently they shouldn't, because she doesn't have any regard for them. It seems like she's almost more concerned with establishing her own power for her own power's sake, not for the responsibilities that would come with it. And so I thought that it was funny that it was Daemon that gave her this dose of reality, because he's been this reckless character who is kind of telling Rhaenyra, hey, you are acting a little too reckless here. Your position's not as secure as you might think. And kind of giving her a dose of reality to wake her up to that she might need to pay more attention to what's going on with the common people of Flea Bottom and King's Landing.
Yeah, that's true. But he also, when they go into the pleasure house, he kind of says, this is where people come to just take what they want.
Right.
And that sort of goes with Damon's character, is that he takes what he wants. And I was surprised at the restraint he showed. But I think there's a little bit of mixed messaging from him.
There 100% is, yeah.
It is very much and I think part of that too is he sees her kind of like himself, and wants to share his world with her a little bit, but at the same time, he's a really interesting character. I'm very much conflicted on him because I think I'm jumping forward here when he's talking to King Viserys, and he's like, what about when we were kids? We just went out everywhere and we got with whoever we wanted to. It didn't matter. She's a woman. Or, I know that's another conversation between him and Rhaenyra, but I feel like they really meld well together. It's that she's kind of bucking against this being a woman and this whole weight of responsibility that you have to marry, you have to be virtuous and everything else, and she's like, well, no, I'm going to be the king, and so I can do what I want. And we kind of see that too when she gets back after she's rebuked by Daemon, and she gets back and she's like, hey, Corlys. Let's play a little
Sir
bit.
Kristen Cole, you mean?
That's what I meant. Corlys is the sea snake.
Yeah.
Oh. His son. She'll play hide and seek with his son later on.
So I'm gonna just go back really quick and
you do
focus
it. I
more
jumped all over
on
the place.
focus more on what happened between Rhaenyra and Daemon in the Pleasure House. And so I thought this scene had a couple different interpretations of you could take it or how you could take it. So I think that there's the interpretation that Daemon was showing restraint. He wanted to have sex with Rhaenyra and decided, last minute, I can't do this to my niece who I love, and I can't follow through with my desires, my wants, even though I'm in a place where you take what you want. And so he stopped. But there's the other side of the coin where you can see that maybe because of the conversation Daemon had with Viserys, maybe he was angling to try and get Rhaenyra for himself to secure a claim for the Iron Throne. And Daemon's always been somebody who takes what he wants when he wants it. And how this plays against him, though, is when he started to kiss Rhaenyra. She kissed him back and went into it. She was down for it. And he lost the control that he had of the situation. And he wasn't able to get it up. And so, because of that loss of control where it was consensual between them, and he was like, I don't know how I feel about this anymore. It's not getting me where I need to go. And then that's where he gets frustrated because of his impotence and has to leave. And that's where there's those two views of how and why did Daemon take Rhaenyra to this place, and like how did he mean for the night to go versus how did it actually go for him.
Yeah, so what you're saying is it kind of sounds like there's a possibility that this was all premeditated on his part.
Yeah.
In order to stake his claim and sully her name enough so that he could get her.
Exactly. And so when we talk about, I'm just going to skip past Rhaenyra and her Kingsguard moment here and just focus on Daemon and the king conversation here.
Yeah.
Because Daemon is being accused by King Viserys of sullying Rhaenyra's reputation, sullying her name, making her unfit for a high lord to take to wife because she's not a virgin anymore. And Daemon knows he didn't sleep with her, but he doesn't deny it at all. He probably thought, okay, the king's not gonna hear my words anyway. He's gonna hear what he wants to hear.
Yeah.
But he still didn't defend himself at all. He was just like, you want to think that? Go right ahead. Think that I slept with your daughter, slept with my niece. This isn't anything that Targaryens haven't done before, but I'm not going to sit here and, try and beg you for forgiveness because that's not who I am. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was so interesting because you see that Rhaenyra, when she's having that conversation with her father and how she vehemently denies sleeping with Daemon, how he doesn't believe her. He gives her the tea anyway at the end of the episode to say, you said you didn't do it. I'm hearing otherwise. Here's the tea just in case. And I think that just shows, again, the societal pressures that are facing Rhaenyra, because if she got with child, who would want to take her to wife in this world here for Game of Thrones? Now, before we go any farther, I need to flash back to the Kingsguard moment with Rhaenyra here. Because, first of all, I thought that this was almost a reversal of what Daemon tried to do with Rhaenyra. How Sir Kristen Cole and Rhaenyra have obviously had this flirtation going on all season, and she's obviously picked him for the Kingsguard because he was qualified, but also because she thinks he looks good in his armor. And Kristen Cole here, he's the highest that any Cole has risen, which is the Kingsguard position, and he has so much more to lose in this situation than Rhaenyra. There's that power dynamic in play with her and him, where Daemon was trying to lord his power as being a older, powerful male over Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra's holding her position almost over Sir Kristen Cole, being like, I'm going to tease you a bit, and then we are going to get down and dirty here. And although Sir Kristen wanted to, this was by no means non-consensual. It did take coaxing from Rhaenyra to get him to get into it here. But focusing on the scene here, I thought that for a Game of Thrones show, this was a very tastefully done sex scene. I thought that the cinematography here was did a really good job of letting you know what was happening without getting overly explicit or overly graphic and without showing any real nudity. There's hinted at nudity, there's suggested nudity from Rhaenyra. And the Pleasure House is a whole other story. But you have this sex scene going on with Rhaenyra and Sir Criston Cole, overlaid with the sex scene going on with Viserys and Alicent.
Ugh.
And just the contrast of those two together was just a great visual to like show you what it actually means to be queen in this society. Where Alicent had talked to Rhaenyra previously about how her mother basically was forced to have children until she died in childbirth. And that being a queen, that's pretty much what your role is expected to be. You're expected to be this heir-producing machine. And it doesn't matter that King Viserys looked like a zombie flopping around on top of her. And she obviously was not into it. Versus Rhaenyra, who was taking what she wanted and was definitely in control and into the situation that she was a part of.
Yeah. And the king even kind of says it later on, too, in terms of, like, her will. He talks about, her and Daemon and how they have the blood of the dragon in them, and they're erratic and chaotic. And I think that was really made abundantly clear with this episode with her. And I just thought it was so interesting because you could definitely see her innocence throughout the episode. And then after the act and stuff, and, like, even the lies... she didn't really lie necessarily. She more avoided.
She did. She said that Daemon didn't touch her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe he didn't touch her with his hands. I don't know. Well, I'm pretty sure he did. But we don't know. I do have one criticism of this episode, and this is off the story part. It was so flippin' dark. Like, come on. They gotta lighten some of this up just a little bit. But I get it. Anyway,
I get that.
Like I was saying,
I
though,
didn't have an issue with the darkness, but...
Well, I mean, I was trying to watch it in the middle of the day, and I had all the blinds closed and everything else, and I could still barely see. It's okay. I got the gist. Anyway, but what I was trying to say there is you could definitely see kind of like her innocence, and then like afterwards, like it's gone almost, right? But even that conversation with her dad, and she's like, you know what, I'll do my duty still. And like you said, he doesn't believe her, but she does get him to fire the hand.
This is obviously like a big move for her because she tells her dad, okay, I'll do my duty, now do yours, because you have a snake in the grass on your council here who's been angling for the throne or to get his blood on the throne since before day one of Aegon's birth. So she correctly points out to the king that his hand, while being loyal to the empire or the realm in theory, has been having his own self-interest at heart. He put Alicent in the king's path, and the king finally becomes aware of this and be like, maybe you did this, like that was a subtle move, I wasn't expecting that. And then angling again, all these little things about making sure that Aegon was shown in the best light, like saying, oh, is this stag proof that the gods favor Aegon to be your heir? All of these things, having spies following Rhaenyra or reporting on Rhaenyra, it does show that while Otto Hightower may say he has the realm's best interest at heart, and he still is not completely selfless and does have his own self-interests at heart as well. And I feel like the king does a good job of saying, the realm owes you a debt, but I can't trust you anymore going forward here. I need someone who's more impartial than what you have become.
Yeah.
And then dismisses him from his service.
I thought that was done very tastefully. Now, you brought up the spy thing, and we saw, like, when Daemon woke up before he got interrogated by King Viserys, he woke up with Lady Misery.
Right.
Now, we don't know what's happened between her and Daemon since, he went off to war.
Since he left for the Stepstones, 3 years ago or more.
But it seems like she's kind of started her own business, if you will.
For sure.
And
she says she got out of the skin business and into a different sort of enterprise.
Yes, and it seems like it's an information
For sure.
because she receives money, and it looked like almost like the same kid, right?
It was the same kid, 100%
Okay.
the same kid.
So makes me think one of two things. One, obviously she's part of the whole network there, which is, I think, very reasonable. And then the other thing too is possibly this was pre-planned by Damon to have that information taken to Otto.
Well, you hear her say when Damon asks her what she's doing, she says, helping you. And then, we get the kid coming back, giving her the money there. So whether she did it at Damon's behest or because of what Damon did for her previously, she was doing this with the purpose of lowering Rhaenyra's status and rising up Damon's.
Yeah, that's the way I think about it. I didn't take it quite as far as that, but now that you say that, yeah, that makes sense.
Although, at the same time, I say that, and the report was that Rhaenyra was with Damon at a pleasure house, so that's not really going to help Damon's status with the king.
It's kind of a tricky situation because you don't know exactly, what she's saving him from. Maybe it was that she saved him from going any farther with her.
Maybe, yeah.
Because, as I said, it was really dark, so I don't know what pulled Damon away necessarily.
So I'm not sure if you've been watching the after credit scenes. It's behind the scenes things that the producers of the show have been releasing, like they did with Game of Thrones. So they do clarify in that it was Damon's impotence that he wasn't able to go through. And again, I'm kind of thinking it's probably because he lost control of the situation, where it was Rhaenyra starting to get into it too, and he was realizing exactly what it is that he was doing.
Well, either way, I think there was some good character development there and we ended off on a good note. Rhaenyra is willing to do her duty now. We'll see if she's willing to drink the tea or not.
I bet she doesn't, but I don't think we'll find out. But I don't think we'll actually find out, as far as I don't think it's going to be important to the story.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder if anything else will happen with her knight.
Yeah, who knows? So before we get out of here, there are a couple more things I want to bring up really quick. Okay. So we already talked about how this episode showed the loss of innocence for Rhaenyra. Mm-hmm. I also just want to point out that this was my favorite episode for her and her actress and her personality, because I felt like she wasn't just angry all the time in this episode. I felt like there was a good wave of emotions that she went through between being a little forlorn by doing her duty and seeing all the suitors, to being excited for seeing her uncle, for being a little lusty at the pleasure house and in her bedroom, and then being a little panicked at the end as well when she's trying to convince Alicent and everyone else that she didn't sleep with Daemon.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just a good range of emotions for a character who has been a little one-dimensional, but still overall been good.
Yeah, and I think it was a bit of a reality check for her too. You're not above this, even though you want to be, and you think you should be. If this stuff had happened, it would have ruined you.
Definitely would have, yeah. The next bit I want to bring up is that if Rhaenyra has agreed to marry Laenor Valerian, which she has, and there's a wedding in the future, what do we know about Game of Thrones and weddings? So that alone has me excited because of the potential for chaos that will ensue. Not sure exactly what will happen on screen or not, but just the potential alone has me salivating for good Game of Thrones chaos.
Oh gosh. Oh, Dylan. Are you tipping your future knowledge to me with your giant grin?
No, I'm talking about the trailer that was shown at the end.
I didn't watch that.
The episode.
So.
Oh yeah, it shows a wedding happening, and I'm just what could be interpreted as the lead up to a wedding happening. But I'm just saying in general that whenever we've seen the Red Wedding, Joffrey and Marjorie Tyrell's wedding,
bad things happen.
The Purple Wedding is what it's called. Bad things happen when people get married and fall in love in Westeros.
Maybe not even fall in love.
Well, maybe not fall in love. Yeah. But all in all, again, I thought this was a good episode, not a great one. Definitely more of that transitional piece episode here. There wasn't a crazy big time jump, which I'm happy about, although there definitely was at least a few months that took place in between that we didn't see. But either way, I thought it was okay for this one. Do you have any closing thoughts, Mike, before we get out of here?
No, I'm excited for what happens next.
All right, so with all of that being said, it's time to get out of here. This is Two Nerds signing off. See ya.
See ya.